Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our January General Membership Luncheon with the Salisbury Area Chamber of Commerce. Keep eating, grab seconds, get dessert. I'm Bill Chambers. It's a privilege and honor to be President and CEO of the Chamber. If we could start off our program today by leading, let's ask Larry Richardson, our guest, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Larry. We have some special guests with us, as we always do at our lunches. I just want to take a minute to welcome some of these individuals. Mary Ashanti with the COMPARATIve chapter of the NAACP. Thank you, Mary, for being here. Gene Malone, COMPARATIve Board of Education. Thank you, Vice President. Dave Ryan, Executive Director of Salisbury COMPARATIve Economic Development's with us. Ashley Teagle, who is the new exec at the COMPARATIve Libraries. Ashley, welcome. And Weston Young, who's the Deputy Administrator for COMPARATIve County. Thank you all for being with us today. A few upcoming events. These are on the dining tables. There's a couple things I just want to highlight. You really should think about sending some of your staff to these DLLR workshops coming up on the 24th at the Chamber. State of the Schools, very important annual event. You'll hear from our superintendent on what's happening currently in the schools. She'll talk a little bit about her FY20 budget. This is an imperative event, as you all know, where we are at when it comes to investing in public education, and the commitment needs to be ongoing. MOE is not acceptable as a mechanism to invest in public education in COMPARATIve County. If you're new to the Chamber or you want a refresher, Chamber 101 is on the 30th of this month at the Chamber at 7:45, and on the 31st, the next day, we have our installation breakfast here at the Civic Center. All of our new board members and voting council members will be sworn in. It's a fun event. There'll be some surprises. I'm not going to give it away. February 8th, we have our second annual February Beer Festival. We have 12 or 13 craft brewers from all over the shore. 5 o'clock at the Downtown Art Gallery. There's a few tickets left. They are really going fast. If you're interested in being a sponsor, we do have a couple of very reasonable sponsor levels that include tickets. See myself or Lauren or Kathy or Kara if you're interested in that. And another equally important event is the 21st of March at the War Museum. It's the second annual Spring Soiree. This is a celebration of our CTE program and the students in the county. If you were there last year, I think you'll know you had a wonderful time. The food was prepared by the CTE culinary students, and all of the programs were on display at the War Museum, including some live entertainment. It's a lot of fun, and I hope you'll have a chance to support that again on the 21st of March. So again, welcome to our January Membership Luncheon. I want to draw your attention to the screen here in our dining room and the sponsor boards as you enter today, and thank the numerous patron sponsors who generously support your Chamber. The patron program is a key component for the Chamber that allows the Salisbury Area Chamber of Commerce to produce quality educational and advocacy programs for our members and the regional business community. I especially want to thank our diamond level patron sponsors, Pohanka Automotive Group, Sandy is with us today, Comcast Spotlight, Stephanie's here, Beacon at Salisbury University, the Salisbury Independent, new diamond sponsors just joined us, the Maryland and Delaware Group of Long and Foster, D3 and 47 ABC WMDT Television. Can we have a round of applause for their support of the Chamber? One of the things that we are engaged in is an energy co-op program for our members and their employees. And Joe Tabling from CQI is here. Joe, just give us a quick update on the energy co-op program.
Yeah, hi guys, thank you. The energy co-op program that the Chamber has is unique in the fact that it works in aggregation buying pools. Everybody can shop around, and that's great. A lot of people have and are working with the supplier, and that's fantastic. But 99% of the time, you don't have the same buying power as a Purdue, as a Northrop Grumman. By collectively taking everybody's usage here, plus members of 20 other chambers throughout the state, we leverage that by shopping all the third-party suppliers. I mean, everybody that's out there. It's not just one or two. We work with all of them. And we're able to secure a rate lower than what you can get on your own or anybody else can offer to you. Program's no charge. It's a free chamber member benefit. It's for you, it's for your family, it's for your staff and your staff's family, all at no charge. If you're in a program, fantastic. That I applaud you because you're definitely saving money. But if you're curious, if you're still leaving money on the table, let us check it out for you, and we can let you know if you are getting the lowest rate possible. Our programs actually can work over a year and a half outside of your present contracts, just to let you know. But it's here to help. It's here to answer your questions. It's here to address any kind of scams that have been going on. You're curious about, is this legit or not legit? We're here to help. We're here to advise. No pressure. And it's a member benefit that you and your staff should definitely take advantage of. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. So before we get to our featured speaker, I want to roll out the new Chamber Chat. It's now available to all of our businesses and organizations. This is a YouTube and online video production. It's television quality, produced by our member and friend Jesse Campbell with Visium. It's a short vignette that gives your business and organization the opportunity to sell services, products, promote an upcoming event, or just promote your company and your brand. It's different from the old Chamber Chat. That was informational. You weren't allowed to sell anything. So with that great new format, I think this is going to serve our members and organizational members much better because they can get down and dirty about what they're trying to provide from their business. So today, our guest speaker is no stranger to the Salisbury Area Chamber of Commerce or the business community in Maryland at large. Larry Richardson joined the Maryland Chamber of Commerce as its Vice President of Government Affairs in October of 2016. Prior to his arrival at the Maryland Chamber, Richardson served as a claim attorney and jurisdictional specialist for State Farm Mutual Automobile Insurance Company. Larry brings more than 2 decades of experience as a government affairs representative for State Farm Insurance to the Maryland Chamber. A registered in-house lobbyist, Maryland, Baltimore City, and Washington, D.C., Larry was accountable for multiple facets of activities relating to legislative, general business, public relations issues before the Maryland General Assembly, the Council of the District of Columbia, the Baltimore City Council, and their respective executive branches of government and all relevant regulatory entities. Prior to his position with State Farm, Richardson worked as a staff attorney for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Maryland for 10 years, 5 of those years as counsel for the Office of Government Affairs. So what are the hot legislative issues before our General Assembly in 2019 that could adversely impact shore businesses and organizations? Let's find out, and please welcome Larry Richardson.
Good afternoon, everybody. How are you all today? Thanks. Oh, okay. Is this better? Is this got it? Hello? Hello? Are we there? Sorry about that. Thank you all very much. Very much appreciate the invitation to be here today. As Bill noted, been with the Chamber now. This will be my 3rd session with the General Assembly, dealing with the General Assembly for the Maryland Chamber of Commerce. Prior to that, I was 22 years at State Farm, 20 of which doing government affairs work. And Greg Riddell was my agent. Greg and I worked together down in the Baltimore, and then we worked on the Western Shore together. So I don't see him here. I'll yell at him for not coming. So, as Bill noted, what we anticipate, this session is going to be interesting. I guess let me first, am I going in the right direction? There we go. Let me start off with what happened. When we had the 2019 Maryland General Assembly, it notes a number of changes. The Senate, they had 18 incumbents of the 47 did not return. 11 didn't run for re-election. 10 were Democrats, 1 Republican. 5 lost their primary race, 4 Dems and 1 R. 2 lost in the general election race, 1 Democrat, 1 Republican. In the House, 43 of the incumbents were not coming back. 30 didn't run for re-election. They ran for various county other offices. Some ran for federal offices. 7 lost in a primary race. 7 Dems lost in their primary. 6 lost in the general election race, all of which were Republican. Net effect that you had, So in 2018, you had 33 Dems in the Senate. You now have 32. Republicans were 14. Republicans essentially gained 1 seat in the Senate. The House is a different story. In 2018, as you can see there, you went from 90, Democrats gained a total of 8 seats, went from 91 to 99. Republicans dropped down to 42. Where that comes into import as we get into the elections is that the Republicans had targeted what they referred to, especially in the Senate, as the drive for 5. With the 2018 numbers, if the Senate Republicans could have captured 5 more seats in the Senate, it would have established a veto-proof majority in that Senate body. Right now, the Democrats have what we refer to as a veto-proof majority in the House and the Senate. The governor vetoes a bill. If the Democrats do a party call, and every Democrat votes the way leadership directs, they will have the 60% necessary to override the governor's veto, and therefore it becomes law. With that election brought some changes in Budget and Tax. Senator Ed Casemeyer, who had been reasonably friendly for business, chose not to run for re-election. He's being replaced by Nancy King, who has been good for business. So we think we're going to be okay, relatively speaking, with leadership there. Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs, affectionately known as EHE, because that's a whole lot shorter to say than Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs. Joan Carter Conway was chair. She was defeated in her primary. Paul Pinsky is now serving as chair of that committee. That's going to make it a challenge for business in that committee. In finance, business lost a very good friend in Mac Middleton. Mac was defeated in his primary, targeted by the unions, basically for not pushing the $15 minimum wage last year. Being replaced by Dolores Kelly. I've worked with Dolores for a number of years now in various other committees that she's been in. Nobody will ever replace Mac. But that being said, Dolores is, I think, going to be good for business. Dolores understands business. Dolores Kelly was one of the few senators on the Senate floor as a Democrat that supported businesses' efforts to fix HB1, the mandatory paid leave bill that passed. On the House side, there was one change in leadership. Joseph Valerio, longtime chair of the House Judiciary Committee. Joe had been there so long, had he won re-election, he would have been starting his 45th year in the General Assembly. Joe was a trial lawyer. I'll leave it go at that. Being replaced by Luke Clippinger. Now, Luke is a very progressive Democrat. Luke is also an assistant state's attorney in Anne Arundel County. Worked with Luke a number of years. Luke does understand business concerns. We've had a good working relationship with him in his past. So I think with Luke being in that role as chair, it could have been a lot worse, folks. Let me just put it that way. Okay, what can we expect in 2019? With those numbers that I showed you relative to the General Assembly, especially on the House side, those seats that the Democrats picked up, as well as some Democrats taking over for previous Democrats, there's a decidedly progressive shift in that chamber. It raises some concerns as we walk into the 2019 session. This right now is probably going to be our biggest issue that we'll deal with, is going to be the increase in the minimum wage. But it was introduced last year. There were actually 4 different bills that were put forward. They didn't pass. Supposedly it was in deference to the fact that we were dealing with the recent enactment of the mandatory paid leave bill. This is what we're hearing right now. They've held a press conference. The bill purportedly has been put into the system. No one's seen a copy of it yet. Key parts are going to be that if this were to pass, at the end of this year, later in this year, the minimum wage would go up to $11 an hour. Currently, it just reached $10.10 in the latter part of last year. It will then go up each year by $1 through 2023. My apologies. So by 2023, it will reach the $15 minimum. One of the issues with this bill that we have a concern about is going to establish an automatic cost of living increase will be built into it. So that once you hit $15 an hour, essentially you're going to look at what the cost of living is. If the cost of living goes up, the minimum wage will go up. The cost of living stays constant, the minimum wage stays constant. If the cost of living, if we have a 2008 all over again, you're still dealing with whatever that minimum wage is. That's a concern. That's a major concern with that automatic factoring built in, what it creates for a business, especially small business. What's also of particular concern is that proponents have stated that what they're going to seek to do is to eliminate the exceptions that are under the bill as well. Right now, under the current minimum wage law, there are exceptions to paying that wage to farm workers, to employees under 20 years for a period of time, for some amusement and recreational establishments. There is a window where you do not have to establish and pay a minimum wage, especially depending upon how many months of operation that you have. The proponents are talking about eliminating all of those exceptions so that everybody starts off at a minimum wage of $15 an hour or whatever it's gone up to at that time, no exceptions in perpetuity. That's a major concern for business. I will figure this out yet. As I told Bill, it's, amen. Here we go. As I told Bill, when I started with the chamber, they made me get one of these. Prior to that, I had a very good relationship with my BlackBerry and my flip phone. So that tells you my technological skills. Another issue that we're fairly confident is going to get introduced this session, which should be very high on your radar screen, is changing Maryland to a comparative negligence state. Currently, Maryland is what is known as a contributory negligence state, which means us, along with Virginia, Alabama, and North Carolina, and to an extent, DC. If there's a negligence action that occurs, if the injured party is 1% or more at fault or contributes to their injury, there's no collection. A comparative negligence scenario would establish that if, and using the more common version of it, if the defendant is less than 50% at fault, they can collect for their injuries up to that percentage. So what that means right now is, first off, it puts were that a pass, we are in constant business competition with the state of Virginia, or the Commonwealth of Virginia, among issues such as this, the issues such as corporate tax rate. Right now, Maryland is at 8.25%. I'm going to touch base on that later. Virginia is at 7, about to go down to 5. This could mark another scenario where we are losing a competitive advantage or competitive dealing with Virginia. Major concern about businesses potentially, if this goes into place, there's a strong potential of businesses shifting out of Maryland down to Virginia. And also what will happen for a business purpose. What this will essentially mean is going to be more claims, more litigation, more settlements. What that means to you all, from my previous life at State Farm, we used to describe rates get increased when what you look at is what's called loss cost and loss frequency. The more you pay out, the more times you pay it out, the more impact that's going to have on your premium. This will definitely lead to a jump in your insurance premiums. Technological point, one of the issues that's making some ground is 5G or small cell deployment. What this is, it's the next generation technology. As you all know, we got the cell towers that run several hundred feet up in the air. In a rural area and in an urban area, they don't work that well. This is a technology that's being developed which works by line of sight transmission, and they're small transmitters about this big by this big. Delaware recently took on doing this. I think they're fairly well along, if not completed. They worked hand in glove with, the industry worked hand in glove with the Delaware government to get this set up. It has extended communication capabilities tremendously. It brings broadband into rural areas. Much easier to get broadband into rural areas through this process. Some of the counties and municipalities have concerns. Clearly, relative to licensing, the fees associated with licensing. We have been working with both MACO and MML. We expect to continue to work with those groups this year as this legislation moves before the General Assembly. Something all you should be aware of. RPS, Renewable Portfolio Standard Increase. Currently, by law, Maryland is required to have 25% of its electricity through renewable energy sources, solar, wind, in particular. Two bills we understand are going to be coming in. One is going to seek to increase that to 50% by 2035. There is also a bill in the works from the proponents of renewable energy sources to try to mandate that Maryland must have, at a point not too far in the future, 100%. So all of its electricity must come from renewable energy sources. What's that mean? In order to accomplish that, what you're going to have happen is that you're going to see there's going to have to be a massive increase in the use of solar panels. For those of you from down the Ocean City area, this will mean an absolute increase in the number of wind turbines off the shore. It's a concern that we've got. Maryland is doing very well at the 25%. We're actually on the goal of reaching the 25% by 2020 is expected to be done. The state and in business and the chamber, we're having some discussion relative to the 50% about what further movement could possibly feasibly and practically be done. But a full 50%, and especially the 100%, is literally going to it's going to be a disaster for business. It's going to be a disaster for rural areas, the shore. You're going to see this. You're going to see a huge influx of solar farms and wind turbines. Banning non-compete clauses. This was a bill that was put in earlier. We were able to defeat it. As many of you know, a lot of times a business will use a non-compete clause, which means if you leave my employee for X amount of time, you can't work for a competitor. What this bill would do would extend that down to specifically include individuals at a $15 wage or for an annual salary of 31.2. This has its genesis in New York City. So I can tell you what happened. It dealt with the Jimmy John's case. Apparently an individual who owned a Jimmy John's franchise had employees, had them sign non-compete clauses. One of the individuals left, went to work, I think, for Subway, and he got sued. So the courts actually ruled in favor of that employee. This clearly becomes a nightmare for business. Part of what we've always testified is that proprietary information and trade secrets don't know a salary level. We have one business that testified last time that brings their individuals in at a fairly low wage for about a 6-month period as they go through a training process. Again, and they're learning all of the company secrets. Once they reach that point, once they reach that 6 months, then their salary goes up and they're a full-time employee. That would apply to them. Our argument is Maryland, by law, by case law, has a very set standard as to what constitutes a valid non-compete agreement. We believe Maryland law would have addressed the Jimmy John's case, so you don't need this here. This just puts another handcuff on business. It can make it very, very difficult for a business that has a number of trade secrets, proprietary issues, that how they get it out to employees, how they don't get it to their employees. It's going to be that's another business nightmare in the making. Second chance employment. Now we're going to get into some of the good stuff, the positive stuff. The Chamber has been very active in second chance employment. We had a bill that we supported 2 years ago, a very limited bill that would have established that in certain enumerated businesses, generally businesses that do not involve direct customer-to-customer, employee-to-customer contact, transportation, what it would establish is that if an employer hires an individual, a returning citizen coming back into the workforce, that if a scenario developed, this would have protected the business from being sued for, in a civil matter, for negligent hire or failure to adequately supervise. The example that we give, I'm coming out of prison, I've done my time, I'm getting a job, I'm going to work at a factory. Bill and I work together on the floor. I'm a Ravens fan, he's a Redskins fan. We have a fight over football. He takes a swing at me, I duck and I plow him. Sorry, Bill.
It's hard being a Redskins fan.
I was trying to be nice. So he sues me. So he sues me as the tortfeasor who injured him. And that makes sense. What would currently happen is that Bill would then also sue the employer for negligent hire, as in, well, he was a criminal, you should have known he would do something wrong, or failure to adequately supervise. Again, he's got a criminal record, he's a bad character, you should have been watching him better. More often than not, those cases don't go to trial, but what they do is generally you're involved in a litigation cost. There's sometimes a settlement. There's a cost to the business, both in defense cost, litigation cost, employee cost. This would be a protection from that. We think this makes sense. A number of states and cities around the country have something of this already. We think this can help get those folks back into the working environment. You know, you have a job. You know, it's been shown employment, continued employment, can help cut down on the recidivism rate. So we think this is a good step. Opposition had been by the trial bar last time. We've been working with a lot of other folks. So we're hoping to be able to move this one forward. Business tax relief. Again, I touched base on the 8.5 on the corporate tax rate. Said back in 2008, Maryland went from 7% to 8.25%. Right now, we are equal to DC. Everybody in our surrounding environment in the Mid-Atlantic region is well below us. Virginia is currently at 7%. When the feds did the tax change last year, the federal tax changes, Maryland immediately saw a windfall from the decoupling. They had to now pay tax in Maryland from business of roughly $225 million. If no changes are made to the business tax structure by Maryland within 5 years' time, that will be at $500 million of surplus that the state's seeing off of business. Many of you may be aware of the recent ruling by the Supreme Court relative to online sales tax, the Wayfair case. That's anticipated to bring in potentially another $100 million in windfall to the state. And as I like to add, for everybody who tried to buy lottery tickets over the summer to win the $1 billion, that brought $25 million into the state. There's a lot of money out there in a surplus. A lot of that surplus and potential surplus has come from business. So we think from a competitive standpoint, from a fair standpoint, let's take Maryland back down to 7. We're still going to be off from Virginia. And in fact, Virginia has a bill in right now that within 2 years' time would take their corporate tax rate down to 5%. So we're still going to be not competitive, but if we stay at 8.25 and Virginia goes down to 5, we have a substantive disadvantage when it comes to the larger businesses. For smaller businesses, what we've done as well, we've crafted legislation that's going to allow for pass-through businesses to benefit from the deduction. The feds currently, when they did the tax change, they established a 20% reduction availability for qualified business income. I think on the federal level for single file, it's 157.5, and for a joint file, it's 315,000. So the first 20%, the 20% of that, there could be a 20% reduction on that first group of monies. It's going to be tough. The problem, many of you have heard of the Kirwan Commission that's out there. There's been a price tag of that put on of about $4 billion. That's do a complete revamp of the educational process in the state of Maryland. There's a huge cry to have that windfall monies that I mentioned to you go to that. There's also a lot of other groups out there that are seeking a cut of that tax windfall money. We're going to be testifying and we're going to be arguing that a lot of this came from business. Business needs to get some of that back to remain competitive and to be able to continue to operate in the state of Maryland. That's pretty much what we are sure is coming in. A couple things I do want to touch base on. Many of you may recall what we referred to earlier as the mandatory paid leave, HB1. It was a big issue, especially for the shore, for hospitals, for a number of businesses. We had attempted a series of amendments back in 2017. They were rejected. bill went through. This year, we do know there are a couple amendments that are coming in. One is actually coming from the newly elected senator from the Lower Shore that will be seeking on the 106-day rule. As you know, there was a provision that was put into the law, the bill was amended to establish that for the once you work 120 days, then the employee is eligible to use the accrued sick and safe leave. There was a carve-out that said from 106 to 120, they could use it, but you have to provide proof. And you have to make sure the employee, in advance of starting to work for you, has agreed to provide that written proof. It's not working, didn't work. So right now, basically, we've had businesses where at 106, you got employees started calling out. Oh, I forgot I forgot, well, let me get my doctor's slip, I'll still get it. The bill that's going to be, the bill that's going to come in this session will essentially exempt businesses that employ folks for 120 days or less. So any employee that works 120 days or less is exempt from the entire legislation. It's going to be a fight, but we think out of all the changes that we can get to that law, that may be the most viable, that may be the most rational. Another area we're going to look at relative to that, to trying to get some fixes, is concerning hospitals. What we have found in surveying our members and in talking to hospitals throughout the state, hospitals have been substantively impacted by this bill, by that 106 and 120 day rule. We know of hospitals that have had to shut down wings because they don't have the staff. They've had to cancel and reschedule elective surgeries because they don't have the staff. And the bureaucratic paperwork for pretty much everybody who's been under this is a nightmare. So we know that's going to be out there. We don't know yet what it's going to look like. We don't know what committee it's going to be assigned to. We do know the proponents are coming in to try to take it from 5 days to 7 days. So we know that both sides are going to be in there trying to get some changes to that piece of legislation. So, yes, sir.
Two questions. On the scheduling bill, is that still circling? And under the proposed minimum wage, where do restaurants where waitresses and waiters can make $2 something an hour, where does that?
Sure. As to the scheduling bill, we keep hearing talk that it might come in. I've been doing a lot of work over the interim, kind of getting with legislators that we knew were coming back, again, to hammer home the deficiencies in that. For those of you that may not know, there's been legislation, the proponents refer to it as fair scheduling. We think the more appropriate name is restrictive scheduling, that what would happen primarily targeting restaurants and the retail side of retail businesses. It would require, when that entity hires an employee, it's, hi, welcome to the restaurant, welcome to the store, here's your schedule for the next 3 weeks. So you automatically have to give your schedule 3 weeks in advance to the employee coming in. If you have changes in that scheduling, call-outs, weather-related changes, there's guaranteed minimums the employee must get. There are penalties. There are bonus wages that will get paid if the employer doesn't follow the schedule that's set forth in the legislation. It's problematic. It's very problematic. There are penalties if they don't, there are financial penalties if they don't comply. We get a lot of discussion from the legislators that I've spoken to, especially on the Democrat and progressive side, that they're uncomfortable with that. I've had a number say that if it came out, they wouldn't vote for it. So we don't think it's coming in this year. What I would not be surprised to see those that favor it get a year under their belt working the new folks that are in, and then they can give it a try. As to the minimum wage, as I said, Corey McCray has indicated that they want, the proponents want a clean bill. And as we read that statement, again, we haven't seen the bill, but as we take that to mean, there is an exemption for tipped employees, the tipped wage factor, that would go as well, which would be disastrous. Yes, sir.
Senate Bill 9 is in I think it's in the Budget and Taxation Committee today regarding taxing cannabis-related businesses in the state the same as normal businesses. Has the chamber taken a position on that? Do you have any idea likelihood that that'll pass?
Okay. We have not taken a position on that issue. That has not been one that has surfaced among our members. Just to give you an idea about how we reach a decision, it's not me. They don't trust me that much. What we do is we have 10 what we call policy committees that are broken down by subject matter. When a bill comes in, myself and my colleague review the bill. We make a first determination, does it have a potential impact to our membership as a whole, to business as a whole? If we think it does, we'll send it to the appropriate policy committee made up of our members. They will then debate the issue, then make a determination whether we can support the bill, oppose the bill, support it with amendments, or take no position and monitor it. So this one fell under a take no position, monitor it at this time. My understanding is with the cannabis issue, there may be some bills coming in relative to regulation. A bigger emphasis may come next year. We're fairly confident from what we've heard that recreational marijuana will be a topic of legislation for the 2020 session. So that's when they may become more expansive on that topic.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think that we'll see more restrictions and issues with the J1 visa students coming in?
If you had asked me 2 weeks ago, I would say I think we're okay. That was 2 weeks ago. As many of you know, that was a bill that was hard fought by the shore. That would have set up a scenario that all the J1 students and other H1Bs and other entities that come over on that work travel visa, overseen by the U.S. State Department, would have mandated that those entities that bring those students over, we'll use Ocean City specifically as an example, bring those students over, would have to register with the Department of Labor Licensing and Regulation, would have to file a duplicate set of paperwork with the Department of Labor Licensing and Regulation that they currently do with the Department of State, would have established that each entity would have to then execute a contract with that student with roughly close to 40 mandated items in there. The biggest problem that we had is that what also would have been mandated in that legislation was that the business entities that then employ those students, Dumpsters, Jolly Roger, it's all that, everyone, becomes a part of that contract. So if there's any violation of any of those points in that agreement, that business that's employing that student becomes jointly and severally liable for any damages that exist. So if that had become law and there existed a problem between the foreign labor contractor, which is the entity now that brings the student over, and that student, that business could be on the hook for whatever financial damages exist for that. We were able to defeat that bill. We had a lot of conversation with the sponsors over the interim, and the indication had been that they were not going to go forward with it. Apparently the proponents, who firmly believe that that bill would solve human trafficking in the state of Maryland, which we proved wouldn't have anything to do with human trafficking in the state of Maryland. The proponents still believe it's a viable bill. They're still pushing. We do know that one of the sponsors from last year now, on the Senate side, Senator Lee, is considering reintroducing it. Now, purportedly, they're looking to soften the bill. The joint and several piece would possibly be softened. The employer would still be on the hook, but would there have to be an evidentiary level shown? I'll believe it when I see it. We still think it's a very bad idea. It's heavily regulated by the federal government to begin with. The problem that they sought to address, we established, originates in the country from which the students are coming from. This program's got nothing to do with that. So we think that's a very bad idea. So we've already started ramping some pressure up. If it does come in, we're definitely going to let everybody know. And it's going to be all hands on deck again.
Larry, is the state chamber taking a position on association health plans, specifically the Maryland Healthcare Access Act of 2018, amending it to remove the language prohibiting small businesses from including their owners, employees, and family as a part of a larger pool for an association health plan? I know all the local chambers in Maryland are in favor of this. It'd be something that would include thousands of small
Right.
businesses that currently can't offer any health plan to their employees.
Right. For AHPs, Association of Health Plans, as many of you may know, recently, in 2017, federal government did a change to the regulations that would essentially encourage the establishment of an association health plan. What they didn't do was take the authority to regulate an AHP away from the state. So whatever state law is, that's what will regulate your association health plan. The concern that existed, and when that that piece that was put into that law, ironically enough, there was legislation that was put in last year that sought to, that relative to the health exchange. Generally, I'm going to bore you a little bit, the federal government under the Affordable Care Act essentially taxes a healthcare carrier a certain percentage to help fund the Affordable Care Act. The federal government chose not to impose that tax for 2019. So the decision was made by leadership in both the House and the Senate and on the second floor that, well, we'll take that money, we'll take that pot that would normally be charged to Maryland insurers to pay that affordable care fee. We'll take that, have them pay that to us to establish a reinsurance plan for the healthcare exchange, so that if the federal government were to essentially do away with the Affordable Care Act, there's a funding source to keep it alive. So that was the main focus of that bill as it was, 387, I believe, Senate Bill 387, as it was introduced and debated. So there was no reference of AHPs at all in that bill. When Senate Finance Committee went for voting session, all of a sudden that amendment got put in and got voted out. So the bill got moved to the House side with that provision in there. We immediately had concerns, had conversations with the leadership on the Senate side and with leadership up on the second floor of the governor's office, and were told that they didn't want any amendments to the bill as it was currently amended. So they were not going to entertain any change to that bill. The argument that's been made, and to an extent it is correct, that what that piece did, what that amendment, however, did, the intent of that was to clarify that any coverage under an AHP would fall under small group market regulations. The logic is, under a normal world, you take a bunch of small employers, you put them together to where you get an aggregate enough of employees, you then come under large group market rules in the state of Maryland, which are a bit more flexible, allows a bit more leeway in what you can offer and how you have to offer it. Small group market's pretty rigid. We've had conversations with leadership, with the health carriers, with our members. The logic behind that is that what had happened, the history of AHPs in Maryland, I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with it. Maryland used to have a fairly robust association health plan market. Back in the 70s and the 80s, they started to see abuses develop. As you got into the 90s, you started to see a lot of these plans bellying up, going bankrupt, leaving the employee, the small employer and the employees with literally no health care coverage. So what the legislature did in 95, was retool the regulatory structure relative to on the healthcare side, to where you now have small group market and large group market with a very rigid set of rules in the small group market plan. That came about because of the abuses under the association health plans. The problem that we have is that that's still the mindset of the General Assembly, to an extent the governor's office. There's that reminiscence of that catastrophe that occurred in the 80s and 90s to small employers and their employees. So right now, they're very reluctant to entertain any kind of change on that. We're having conversations with the leadership. We're actually got a meeting set up. Delegate Jocelyn Pena-Melnick, who is chair of the Health and Government Operations Committee, very active in the healthcare, in the entire healthcare regulation and the Affordable Care Act. Actually got a meeting set up with her. We've spoken with the Maryland Insurance Administration, as I said, and the Maryland Insurance Administration's position of that amendment itself was that that was a clarification. That didn't establish the prohibition. The prohibition was already in the law. This just clarified it, and they wanted that clarification in. The proponents wanted the clarification in because of what recently happened on the federal level. In fact, Bill, one of the things that we're looking to set up for the MEAC meeting is to have, I've got Rob Morrow, the Associate Commissioner of Life and Health from the MIA, and Delegate Pena Melnick to be able to come and kind of give their view on it. That's the question on that. It's right now, it's a tremendously heavy lift. This may take some time. Clearly, we're interested in it. Clearly, we're working to see what type of progress we can make to make insurance coverage more affordable for especially small business. It's just not something we need to change a lot of minds before we can reach that point. Yes, sir.
Recently, there was a task force that recommended that alcohol, tobacco, and new motor fuels get stripped from the oversight of the comptroller's office, citing one of the reasons, our comptroller's support of craft breweries.
Mhm.
If that recommendation gets pushed forward and it's passed, I guess, does the chamber see any negative effects to the craft brewery industry? I mean, I know it's a lot of hypothetical since it hasn't happened yet, but his support has certainly helped grow the craft brewery industry.
Absolutely. We do have a few members in the craft brewery industry. I can also tell you, we also have, we've got members on the other side as well. So one of the positions, and I can tell you too, what we have tried to do, when a bill comes into us, we take a look at it. Again, we look for what's good for the overall good of the state, overall good of business. There are times we have legislation where we have a very dichotomic split in our membership on an issue. In that case, the chamber won't take a position. We won't pick one side over the other. But we encourage everybody to go out and work it. Kind of where that right now, but we are watching how far this thing does proceed. We're having conversations with the comptroller's office because it does become a concern. Because clearly, again, you're talking revenues, and anytime you mess with revenues, it's the balloon effect. If you squeeze from here, all that air's still there, it's going to go somewhere else. It's going to expand bigger on some other side. So when you mess with with tax revenues, there's a potential impact for everybody. So we're watching that. We haven't taken a position on that issue specifically right now, but that is something we're definitely watching.
Any other questions for Larry?
Can I make one shameless self-promotion plug?
Absolutely.
If anyone is interested, and Bill knows about it, on January 23rd, the Chamber is hosting what we're referring to as Meet the State. We're going to have an all-day event in which we're having our folks come down, members of local chambers as well as our members. We've got a full day of fun activities planned. What we're going to do in the morning, we're going to make arrangements to have seats up in the gallery so you can watch the Senate and the House in action. Sometimes you may not want to do that, but but we're going to have a meeting set up where we're going to have leadership come in. We're looking at the Speaker, the President, the House Minority Leader, and the Senate Minority Leader to speak to our members about we're going to raise them some questions. In fact, AHP is one of them, and kind of get a feel for them about what they see for business. Our next panel, we're going to have the chairs of Senate Finance, Senate Judicial Proceedings, House Judiciary, and House Economic Matters Committee, where a number of our issues are met. We're going to have those chairs there. Again, same questions. What do you see for business? Get their feedback about not only what do they see happening and down the pike for 2019, but what can we, in their mind, what can we do to help communicate our message, not only to them, but to everyone, to all the other elected officials down there. So we're then going to have, there's a reception in the evening. So we're on our website, mdchamber.org. If you're interested, we'd love to have you. And for the handouts that I have, I do have some more if anybody wanted that. What we do is we outline our what we see as critical, our legislative priorities for 2019 in a bit more depth and detail on what we see as critical factors moving forward this year.
Great. Thank you. And as last year, myself and other members of the chamber will be in Annapolis at the behest of the state chamber on certain bills, but certainly there's some things here that affect the shore that we'll be monitoring, and we'll will be in Annapolis to testify as well. And yeah, if you want to see how sausage is made, come next Wednesday, I will be there. If you're interested, reach out to me. I can make the arrangements to make sure you're registered for that event. So our February general membership luncheon will be at Brew River in Salisbury on Thursday, February 21st. Our guest speakers will be a panel from the Community Conversations on Race. The panel will consist of Chief Barbara Duncan, Donnie Waters, Kevin Lindsay, and Michelle Ennis. The panel will explore diversity on the business environment, improving our ability to engage in tough conversations that translate to a new level of operational comfort for the small business owner, among other issues. It's going to be a great presentation. Go online to reserve your luncheon tickets now. We'll see everybody on the 21st, and thank you all for being here.